communities. That's why I'm running.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for running. My 8th grade algebra teacher was a huge influence in my life, so I appreciate the work you've done as a teacher, certainly. I want to start off just light real quick here. This is a big year to run for any candidate, but as a first-time candidate, it takes a lot of bravery and courage to put your name on the ballot and to put yourself out there. Would love to just hear from you this year, first-time candidate. What's a lesson that you've learned, and how have you found yourself grounded in your own beliefs?
Well, I mean, this was an amazing year to be running for several reasons, but also I would think the biggest reason is that we had the pandemic, and you can tell that with education, we've taken a lot of hard hits. We're talking about losing funding because of loss of revenue from both the locality, the city, and the state, and decisions that, our current politicians at the General Assembly, our current elected officials are making on our behalf. Sometimes, those are difficult decisions, and us as educators, especially in the classroom, we get the last say. And so we always find out at the last minute about what's going to happen with funding for schools. But in running and while canvassing, I think my passion and my desire to be in this position just was strengthened because people got to see firsthand this year. I think more people became aware of what education is facing and what public school specifically is facing, and even more specific, what Richmond Public School students are facing. We're talking about food insecurity, digital divide. There's lack of that, access for whatever reason, whether it's socioeconomic status or, families just that's not at the top of their priorities sometimes. And also home insecurity and the potential job loss. And for some educators also making the decision of going back to work, with potentially having their old children having to stay home. And so I'm in one of those cases. But overall, the public got to see all the disparities that public schools go through and that Richmond Public Schools has to face through. And so every time we're asking for more funding, it's always been hard to get that message across. We hear things like, well, Richmond Public Schools waste money, or they get enough, or they don't know what to do with it. Well, when you see it firsthand, how the needs that our families have, it's really changed that narrative. The other thing is, in canvassing, I've learned that there are some people that, when we, in such a big year of elections, education seems to be the last one on their list. It's like they know who's running for president, they know who's running for mayor, they know who's running for city council, but they don't really pay attention to who's running for school board. And so showing them how important it is to participate in school board elections, and showing them, if how that affects their finances and how it affects the communities they live in the long run over years, has been the hardest task, but I think the most rewarding, being able to educate people about education and being able to get them interested in improving our schools.
Absolutely. Definitely for those listening, make sure you fill out your full ballot all the way up and down both sides. Deanna, you talked a lot about what we're facing this year. I'd be curious to know, share with us, if you're elected in November, what you think the biggest challenges facing you and your colleagues as you head into the spring semester.
Well, I can tell you firsthand right now, you're in my classroom. So this is a lot of people, assume that, Richmond Public Schools teachers just didn't want to go back during the virus. This is an excuse to not have to go to work. Or to take an easy route out. I can tell you right now, 100%, it is not easy to teach virtually. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. We have educators and parents who are more nervous, more scared, and overworked with the idea of trying to make sure that their children are staying on top of their assignments, participating, logging in, being present, attendance issues. So it is not easy. It's really doubled the work for some people, because the other thing is not everybody's tech savvy. Not everybody is used to being, not everyone's a YouTube star or an Instagram star. So they're not used to that. And so to transition your whole practice that has been based on being one-on-one in person into this new medium is a new task for a lot of people. And it's just a whole new adventure. So the reality is that we've learned how to be sensitive and how to adjust our teaching styles, our teaching methods, and even our grading practices to accommodate for some families that because of whatever circumstances is happening at home, they're not able to log on, they're not able to stay on top of their students' grades or their participation and their attendance. So what's going to be important is once elected is making sure that when we start talking about reopening, we're going through every single aspect. We're going through the perspective of an employee of Richmond Public Schools. Doesn't matter if it's a teacher, a cafeteria worker, a bus driver. It doesn't matter what position it is. What is going to make them feel safe? And are we going to have everything that we need to give them that safety, that feeling of safety? And are we going to provide them options, for whatever reason, should they choose not to return to in-person? And for our families, what are we going to do also for those families that choose not to return? How are we going to keep them connected and engaged and continue the instruction without a break? And for those students that return, or if we all return, we don't know what's going to happen in a couple of months from now, but when we return, how are we going to fill in and catch up all of those students that kind of fell behind or have fallen even further behind? How are we going to get everybody back onto a level playing field? And where are we going to get the funding for that? That is always the biggest question, because as we know now, just closing opportunity gaps, just closing student performance gaps is expensive. And now with these circumstances, it's going to be even more expensive. So are we doing everything to prepare for a return that will hit every single one of those concerns that we have, both as parents and educators and community members in general?
Right. You actually lead into our next question really well as we talk about what returning to school looks like. After this summer, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw a lot of protests that included our youth speaking out on a lot of issues that they see facing them in the schools. One of those is school resource officers. As you know, our superintendent spoke out about wanting to remove school resource officers. What's your opinion on that?
So this, my opinion, was developed over the course of the majority of the closure as it came up when this became more of a political issue that was pushed to the forefront. And like many people, especially teachers, at first I was, I thought, wow, I'm surprised. I think of all the resource officers that I've ever worked with, the resource officers that were in the schools where I grew up. And my first thought was, they're great, they're nice, they're amazing people. And they are. That's not a lie. There are some amazing professionals who work in the Richmond City Police Department who are SROs. But then I had to say, well, why is this a concern? And I think this is where, as current school board members, that's where it kind of stops, is that pushing further and finding out why are there people in the community that want SROs removed, and getting out of what makes us feel good and our beliefs. And so I pushed myself to that level, and I started looking into the data and saying, okay, what is going on? What is happening? Well, sure enough, the data is there, the research is there. That one, we across the US, we don't have a system for collecting data on the success of the SRO program. So you can't find any hard statistics that say, yes, this program is beneficial to our students in the community. That just doesn't exist. And as a matter of fact, right now in Congress, there are different congressmen and women that are trying to push for bills that will make that a requirement in our schools, is to start collecting that data, because it doesn't exist. So you can't make new laws based on no facts. The other thing is that in Richmond Public Schools itself, I do remember, and I heard plenty of stories from people that I talked to one-to-one about how it was much easier to call the police officer in than it was to follow the disciplinary process, than it was to start, writing a referral to a student, or sending them to the counselor, or asking the social worker to jump in. And also in education, there's a long process that you have to document over time what is happening with the student and their behavior in class, so that you can get those other resources like mental health help, or special accommodations, or so that you can have them tested for a learning disability that is projecting as a bad behavior in class. So for some people, the realization was that it's easier to just call the police, have somebody deal with it, have the student removed, than it is to do the process of the work. And so that's what we need to eliminate. We need to get rid of that. And so in that process, I also held a town hall, two, and ended up being two, with individuals who both want to change policy to get SROs out of schools, and with Richmond City Police Department individuals who work as SROs. And the common conversation, the common point in the conversations were that it shouldn't necessarily happen immediately. There should be a plan for where will there be mental health services, how do we put in social workers to support our students, and where will that funding happen? And what other options can we have outside of instructional hours to allow the police to still get to know the students, to still get to know the community? But the SRO program itself, right now, I think has just been used as a replacement tool for the lack of services that we have in Richmond Public Schools. And so that's what we need to do. We need to stop policing communities, and we need to stop policing children. And that's one more point I'd like to make on that issue, is that it was very interesting, the conversations that I had with some community members saying, they themselves saying, no, we need police in order to make sure that things are safe. And it's like, there is a level of needing police officers, but it shouldn't have to be every single day that you need police to feel safe in your presence, in your face. So I think this conversation should go further and should include city council representatives to start talking about why is it that our families are not feeling safe in their communities, and that they feel that insecurity is coming into our schools.
Thanks for that answer. I want to pop back to you. You mentioned, serving on the rezoning committee. One of the questions that we got for tonight was about the process of rezoning last year. What are your thoughts on how that played out and the potential for more rezonings in the future?
So I was a representative for the 4th district, myself and another individual from the 4th. And in our case, in this side of town, on this side of the river, it's over capacity. We had different priorities as the committee to try to accomplish. In this area, in the 4th district, it was over capacity in our buildings. One of the things that I pushed for at the end of the rezoning process was to rebuild Elkhart Thompson, which is now all of the students from that school have been moved over to River City Middle School, along with some of other students from Bouchal, to alleviate some of their overcapacity. But if you look at the numbers, the expectation was that school would already be up a little bit above 80% capacity. Which in a couple of years, as was shared with us, the data from the company that surveyed all of our schools and looked into our numbers and our buildings, they said clearly, if within 10 years, if we don't start talking about rebuilding some of these buildings to expand them and to build new schools, including one possibly further out on Jefferson Davis Highway, we would be looking at all of our schools being at overcapacity within 10 years. So that for me is critical, because I've seen what can happen when you have buildings that are overcapacity, when you have classrooms that are overcapacity, because sometimes that can even hold up hiring another needed teacher. You can have an FTE, a full-time employee position paid for. You can have the money for that. But if you don't have the classroom space for that, that can hold a principal from hiring that person. Because where do you put them? Where would you put them, and how would that schedule happen? I saw that happen myself at Albert Hill Middle School. We needed another math teacher for several years, and even when we got the funding, we couldn't do it because we had no space. So that's a concern. So that made it, made us have classes that sometimes were up to 38 kids. Try teaching algebra to 38 middle school children, especially when some of those contents and some of the needs that individual students have really required some one-on-one time or small group time. So I pushed for that. On the other side of town, the conversation was very different, and it talked about integration. And having had worked at a school like MLK and then going to Albert Hill and seeing the difference, one of my biggest concerns, which I've shared with researchers now at Virginia Commonwealth University who are researching this topic now in our recent rezoning process, was that my concern was that even if we moved the students, even if we tried to break up districts so that we could have the demographics on paper of showing we have 50-50 or an even number of representation, did we have the right training already in place, the right employees who had already embraced the process of doing that real integration? Because there must be intent to do that. Because you can end up in a school where you on paper, oh yeah, we have 50 white, 50 black or whatever. And we have, we have everybody, all the ethnicities displayed. But when you go into the classrooms or you go into the cafeterias or you go into the clubs, that's not the same thing in those groups. You see the clear divide. And I've seen that firsthand. So my concern was, if we do it, will we be prepared and will our staff be prepared to really, truly make integration happen?
Yeah, I think that definitely feeds well into something that I know is important to you and talking about as we are bringing more of our students together of different backgrounds. One of the questions we got, someone shared 3/5 of all English language learners in RPS, mainly Latino students, drop out before completing high school. What will you do if elected to make sure Richmond schools are supporting students who don't speak English as a first language?
So this one is near and dear to my heart. Of course, a lot of people say, well, oh, because you're Latinx. No, not necessarily just that, but it's important to me because I've seen it firsthand when you have a child who cannot speak the language and is trying to navigate a school for the first time. And so my concern is all English language learners. And of course, the majority of ours in Richmond Public Schools is a Latinx community. But I've been in a class where I had a student who spoke Arabic. It was a Black student who spoke only Arabic, could not understand what was happening. And I tell you that child cried from the beginning of the class till the end of the class. And it broke my heart because as an educator, I couldn't do anything. I could not do anything. So, making sure that we have the services that they need is extremely important, extremely important. Even in canvassing, I knocked on a door of an individual who's an Indigenous man who, first appearance, it looks like he's white. And he told me his experience of going to Huguenot High School. He came from a reservation, was dropped into high school here in Huguenot High School. And people classified him as dumb. He literally said, I was told you're dumb because you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you. What they didn't know was that he also didn't speak English. He spoke his Indigenous language, but he just looked white. And so that was a big concern. And now in Richmond Public Schools, we have students who, yes, they're Latinx, but a lot of people think that they all speak Spanish. And no, they don't. They speak other languages. They speak Mestizo, which is a whole different Indigenous language in our Latin American countries. Plus all the others. We have students that speak Portuguese and things like that. So that funding that comes to serve English language learners is state and federal funding. So how it's being used, I think needs more scrutiny. How it's being spent, I think we need way more transparency. As it is right now, we do have the option to do the check registry where we could look online where Richmond Public Schools spend specific dollars. But when you see a funding code for ELL, that says a purchase is from Amazon for $2,500 and you have no idea what's getting purchased from Amazon, you don't know if it's really going to students, what is being purchased on their behalf out of that money. So those are the kind of things that I would like to see. Let's push that transparency just a little bit further. And plus in my history, if anybody knows, I've been a big advocate for getting all of our students counted as well, because that's funding dollars that we can potentially lose, but also making sure that we have the right number of staff to serve them. So I myself have put a complaint from the office, the OCR, Office of Civil Rights, to make sure that students are getting that. And like I've told people before, that wasn't to get anyone in trouble. It's to get attention to what needs to be corrected and to make sure people know that there is a real urgency to make that happen. So hopefully with that, we'll push our newcomer program to give some of our newcomer students other options, because not all of them come at the right age to try to graduate high school and get a diploma. And some of them don't come with enough schooling from where they're coming from. Some of them only have as far as, high schoolers with only a 3rd or 5th grade education. There's no way we're gonna expect them to get a high school diploma. So we need to start looking at other job training, technical training, other things that we can start putting them on a track towards so that they have a real sustainable life.
Right. I have a follow-up on that question, as we've talked a lot about voters not necessarily watching all the way down the ballot, watching what's happening in schools. As we talk about students who are English language learners, and this question may come from some of my own unknown, what do Richmond public schools do to meet English language learners rather than teaching them in English? What sort of language justice is happening in the school to teach them in their own language, if at all?
That's actually something we need to be pushing. I think we need to push training to let our staff, to remind our staff that we are not an English only state. So if we need to find new ways to integrate the languages that our students that they are grown up with into learning. At the same time, we need to push that in and assimilate it in while we're teaching them English. And actually research shows that to learn a new language, if you can apply your own current language that you speak, your native language, then you're likely to pick up English or whatever new language you're trying to learn a lot faster. And so that's one thing that I've heard, and that's been alarming, is that there are people that push the idea of English only and that's it. And if they don't learn it, if we don't go hard and only strictly speak English, then they're not going to learn it. No, that's not true. And just like medicine, educators, just like doctors, we need to stay up on top of our practice and keep up with the research and try new things to reach our students. And so if we do that, then we'll realize that, we need to be integrating their native languages into how we teach. And we need to start expanding opportunities with, other, nonprofits who do things like that help schools into teaching students and their families English language, because that's even better when you can have the family practicing English as well. I can't tell you today, as a matter of fact, at the post office, I had to translate for an individual on how to just use a flat rate mailbox, a mailing box. But, those are the kind of things when you look around in the city as a whole, do we have enough options for translating and for interpreting for our families? I would love to see more families on their own accord, not because somebody bussed them there, but I would love to see more families on their own accord going to speak and share their opinions about Richmond Public Schools, both good and bad. I want to hear the good and the bad.
Yeah, agreed. We have one more question I'm going to take, and then, I want to give you some time to wrap up and give your pitch. But it's something that you did touch on a little bit and weave into a few of your answers, talking about transparency, getting tech access to students, what we're doing to make sure they understand that Chromebooks and all that good stuff. So one of the questions we got was the shortage on Chromebooks at the beginning of the year and how that affected students in their online learning. What will you do if elected as a school board member to ensure students have the tools that they need to be successful as we continue to transition into online classes?
Yeah, so that's the thing. One, I'm right now, as it is, a lot of the advocacy that I've been doing for getting more funding for public schools throughout the state of Virginia has been getting in the faces of legislators and and telling them about what our needs are, but telling them specific things about what our needs are as far as instruction. I know a lot of people always say, well, all teachers want is more pay. And that's the easy route. And a lot of politicians will use that to say, well, I can ensure that teachers are going to get more pay. But what educators want is a better quality of life for themselves, a better quality of life for their children and the students. And that includes giving them a learning environment that is optimal, that, has all of those resources. And so I've always advocated for, sharing those stories. And so one of the things that I like to say is, and this is true, just like in every organization, in every profession, there's a market. There are people who sell you things. There's people who design resources for you. And so there is an education resource market out there. There are companies and there are organizations that develop these things, and they trade information with each other about what is up and coming. And so this information is not accessible to the public at an easy cost. And I can give you one organization that does this. Ed Week does a newsletter or a newspaper for educators, but they also have what is called Ed Market. And a subscription for Ed Market's information to education resource companies is $1,200 and something. It's expensive. So that's not a teacher money that somebody's going to say, well, I'm going to subscribe to this. But what they put out is information about what is trending in education, and specifically what is trending in public school education. And so right now their conversation is about how to market your products the best for addressing the COVID slide. And so I'm sure a lot of people have heard that term. So that's the buzzword right now, COVID slide. But if we don't have school board members who know the research behind, one, the summer slide, if they really know what that is and what it pertains to, and then they latch onto terms like COVID slide, then they have these vendors who come to them and promise them these products that, you know, offer great gains and are going to improve student performance, you know, overnight. And that's what we've been caught up in Richmond Public Schools and in other localities in the state of Virginia. And actually throughout the US, the school board members who buy into that. And when those products fail, we blame the teachers or we blame the administrators. We never say, well, who purchased that product? Who did the research? Who looked deep into these products to prove that they're actually effective and that we're going to get a return on investment? And so as an educator currently practicing in the classroom and staying on top of these kind of things and this market and these trends in education, that's the kind of thing that I would bring to the table to ensure that our students are getting the real resources that they need and the real access to things like technology or actual software. You know, we have these online licenses to products that are actually going to work, that products that are actually vetted by our educators. I would love to have a focus group of educators who actually test these out and then say, yeah, this is effective. I can see myself using this every day with my students, versus I'm going to make the decision on it, but I've never taught a day in my life. That's what we have too many times on the school board. And so when we return, we still need to talk about what ongoing tech service are we going to have for the computers. Doesn't matter if they're Chromebooks or actual laptops, full laptops. What are we going to, we're not talking about what are the ongoing contracts for these licenses to the software that we're buying into. You know, what has been effective? Who's taking metrics right now? Who's doing any data tracking on what tools we're using right now that are actually working? So those are the kind of things that I want to see once elected on the school board, is to put that insight and say, look, I can tell you what, I've worked with that product. It's a waste of time. It's cute. It's got little games and figures and kids, you know, do multiplication and win stars, but that's no better than flashcards or something like that. I've seen that too many times firsthand.
Got it. Well, I certainly appreciate the time that you have given us tonight. I know that it's hard to carve out time for every group. So we are super appreciative that you came to join us tonight. You know, in this last minute 30 seconds, you know, why don't you give the voters of the 4th district your last pitch for those who haven't gotten to the ballot box yet or sent in their early ballot, why they should vote for you.
Well, I'd like to let the 4th district know, if they don't know this already, of the candidates, I am a real public school teacher. So I am actually in the classroom, and this is my 10th year. And I continue to stay involved in the classroom, either directly or indirectly, but working with public schools and advancing our schools. I'm very passionate about Richmond Public Schools because since I started in 2011, I saw the potential that there is in Richmond Public Schools. But that potential can't be reached. We can't reach that potential until we all participate in improving our schools, until we're all involved, until we're all providing feedback and input about the kind of schools that we want to see. And so if we really want to retain our educators, if we really want to attract our families to stay in our schools in the 4th district, and if we really want to build the kind of communities that we want to live in and that we've been actually creating in the 4th district over the last couple of years, then we need to participate in getting involved in our schools and making sure that our children will continue that work that we're doing now in the 4th district. And so from a real public school teacher and a parent who has a child in Richmond Public Schools, and a neighbor who I've been over the years participating and being active and being present, I want to be a school board member to help do that work. So, and you can visit my website, deannafierro.com, for more information and my full platform.
Thank you so much, Deanna. I appreciate it. We enjoyed having you here with us tonight, and good luck to you on November 3rd.
Thank you.
So I see our councilwoman has just popped in with us here. Thank you, Kristen, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. You know, you're facing a different type of election year. But before we get into all that, and I know, you know, your time on school board and now city council, many people know you already in the district. But I'd love, you know, for those who are just tuning in or first time voters, just share a little bit about yourself with us.
Okay, thank you, Jamie, and thank you to RCDC for holding this forum, especially right now, the time we're in where we can't connect with people in the conventional way. We're finding new pathways to connect with people during COVID. So I really appreciate this opportunity and you guys facilitating this, because I miss my people. I miss seeing folks in person. And so I'm really happy to have this platform. A little bit about myself. I've lived in Richmond for 15 years. So, you know, according to some people, I'm like a newbie. I moved here when my son was 6 months old, had quit my full-time job, was staying at home, had another child. And the way I got involved with politics, not to give everybody my whole life story, but I'll try and make it quick, is I started looking for schools for Everett when he was about 4, just starting to think about kindergarten, stumbled upon the Patrick Henry Charter School, which was, the charter was approved, but the school wasn't open. So went to a couple meetings, got drawn into the mission of the school, the theme of the school, outdoor education. And actually right now in COVID times, this is like the perfect school to have because so much of the curriculum is out in our parks. It's amazing. But I digress. So got involved with that, and I was just baffled at how contentious the relationship was between the Patrick Henry Charter School and the school board. So when the position opened up in the 4th district in 2012, I decided to run for it, and I won. And I think at that time it was a 4-way race. So, you know, lots of knocking doors and all the good old school campaigning type stuff. It was great. I'm so honored to be on the school board. That is a very tough job. School board is no joke. And I'm so happy that I had that opportunity. And, you know, proud of anybody who decides to step up and run for that role. So served my 4 years, and then in 2016 ran for the seat. That was a 5-way race. And I also won, and I've been in that seat for the last, you know, 3+ years. And then this year, I do not know how it happened, but I'm running unopposed on city council for re-election. And I'm just so honored to be able to represent this district. And, you know, it's literally where my kids have grown up, and we love this community, and I love being a public servant. And so, yeah, you have some questions for me? That's my life story.
And similar to before, you know, and I always do like to start these things on a more lighthearted note, because there are amazing things in this city that we don't get to share and talk about. Mm-hmm. So, you know, one question is, what is your favorite part about living in the 4th district?
Oh my gosh. So definitely like all the park access that we have. I think that's why it would be really hard for me to live anywhere else. Although, look, all of the districts have very charming areas, but I just love how, well, the whole district is adjacent to the river. And we have so much public park space that is along the river in my district. And a lot of it is really kind of hidden, and I mean, it's like rural-ish in a city, you know. So we have a big piece of the James River Park system. We have Forest Hill Park. We have Laris Park, which is like 110 acres. So that is definitely my favorite thing about living in the 4th. I just think we're so fortunate, but it's a city resource. I mean, it's really a regional resource for all, and it's such an attraction. I think I almost don't want to tell people how awesome it is, but it is like the best thing about Richmond.
Absolutely. I definitely, as someone who's just around the corner from the 4th, miss having the south of the James Market over there. Happy to travel to Bryan Park. Our park system is fantastic in the city, but certainly hear you on the park system in the 4th. One of the other things that I think is fantastic, particularly over that way, is just the number of small businesses that exist, especially our cafes and our restaurants. Still, I think, secretly a little untapped. So one of the questions we got was about small business, and specifically about, our COVID response. We'll continue to be concerned about what happens as we continue to move forward in the pandemic to help keep these small businesses of all sorts afloat or able to come back. What sort of work you've been doing on that, or city council?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, and I hope whoever asked it reaches out to me, because I'm kind of at a place where I really want to hear from folks right now if they're small business owners. I am holding a small business town hall on November 4th at 6 p.m. virtual, of course. We sent out my newsletter today, and it had just a save the date, and we'll be putting out more info on that. So it's for folks that either own a business in the 4th district or are a small business owner that reside in the 4th district. The city we've had some grant programs. I've heard of some businesses closing. We have had vacant retail space prior to COVID. And retail space is tough, especially over the last, I would say, decade or so, as more folks have gotten to buying stuff online. And I think COVID has just kind of accelerated that. So I really want to just get feedback from people to see where they are. Are they restructuring what their business looks like? Do they need some sort of help from the city, keep them from going under? Because I do think small businesses are the heart and soul of our city. We are such a small business city. And that's from the person who has like a Target, a Walmart, and multiple grocery stores. I know, I feel so fortunate that we have all of these. We do need the big boxes too, but the small businesses are really the heart of Richmond. And so I want to do what I can to just keep them from going under.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to hear you're hosting that. We'll make sure to also share that information on our platforms. So the next question, and this is kind of rewinding because you come from a special perspective, right? You did have time on school board. Now you're on city council. Taking that experience from one place to another, I think gives you that special place to speak from. So one of the questions we received was only half of all Richmond schools are fully accredited, and the graduation rate was 70% in 2019. Do you support dedicating more money to RPS? If so, where do we find the additional funding? If not, what else can we do or city council do to improve the educational outcomes in Richmond?
Okay, so I'm not sure that, and I would say this whether I'm on city council or school board, I'm not sure dollars necessarily translate to educational outcomes. So just want to put that out there. But I do understand the funding needs in Richmond Public Schools. So something that I spearheaded in 2019, but I don't know what was going on at the time. Oh, I think the mayor had proposed his tax increase, and I think this got kind of lost in the mix. And I had talked about this when I was running for office in 2016, is a dedicated funding stream for Richmond Public Schools. And so it went through council legislatively. It was approved unanimously. It was a piece of legislation that I patroned. So what that means is if we, as a city, approve, let's just to make it easy, $100 million for Richmond Public Schools for the upcoming budget, right? And that is 51% of our real estate tax. Then for the following year, our baseline will still be 51% of the real estate tax. But if the assessments go up, which right now they are, at least on the residential side, and the 51% pot is 115 million, then that's their baseline. So that is something tangible that I've already done to make sure that when the city is financially healthy, that Richmond Public Schools gets an automatic benefit from that. Now, that doesn't mean that's all the funding, but my hope was it would give them something to plan off of so that every year it's not this crazy guessing game. And also, as the city grows and brings in more revenue, then the schools automatically would benefit from that. Now, the downside is we don't know what COVID's going to bring. We don't know if we're heading into a recession. So if revenue goes down, everybody is going to have to tighten their belt. So that's the ups and the downs. I wish this had been implemented a couple years earlier, but we are where we are. And I do think once everybody gets used to the structure that it will be very positive moving forward.
Right. I'm sure as a city council person, you are plenty used to getting all sorts of budget questions. So I don't think this next question will come as a surprise as we talk about, budgetary items. Until the coronavirus pandemic hit, Navy Hill was the key issue on city council for a long time. Will you share your thoughts with us generally on public funding for large scale development projects in Richmond, and what lessons, as we can draw from that project as we do try to, at some point, build our small businesses and build this city.
So I'll start at the end. Lessons learned is a long list, and I don't think we have enough time tonight for lessons learned. I don't think that taxpayer dollars should be going to large projects like that. I'm not saying no tax dollars should ever go to any development project, but I think that this one was just not the right fit. It was an RFP that was written for one applicant, essentially. And so when myself and 4 other council members in February put our names on a resolution asking the mayor to withdraw all the Navy Hill papers, we sort of laid out a map of how to go forward. And exactly what you're asking, like, how do we actually make development happen in Richmond? That's what we put in this document. Appraisals of properties before we start talking about giving them away, so we know what our land is valued at. Our competitive RFPs. For this specifically, we put in some language saying it could be an all or nothing, because this was, you have to say yes on the whole project. You can't do it piecemeal, which, we know is not true, because right now a piece of that project has spun off and is working its way through the wheels of government. So it was not the right project for us. And it's unfortunate that we spent 6 months of resources. I personally spent a ton of time. I mean, it's not like I got to this decision to not support this casually. You know, I met with folks, we talked about it, we talked about all the different angles, but it just did not seem like a good fit for Richmond. And if we had approved that with COVID and so much of it being dependent on the tax dollars from commercial properties, we would be in a world of hurt right now.
Yeah. Kind of, this one is a little bit down, but I want to make sure that we get to it because, you know, we're on a specific amount of time tonight, but talking about other projects and something we haven't talked about at all tonight is transportation in the city, a walkable city, and, you know, bikeable city. Richmond City Council's put Pulse Corridor Plan rezoning on hold. Can you talk more about that and what your thoughts are?
I don't know if I have a ton to share, except for I think that corridor is shared by 3 council members, and all of them wanted to delay the vote to have more time for public input and outreach. And I know there is some angst amongst the neighborhood groups. So I'm not really strong on that issue right now. I'm sort of waiting to hear from the folks that represent that area. I think that is such the Pulse, yes, it's a huge initiative for the city. However, you're talking about, I mean, the height is really the issue with that paper and the zoning for that. And I think that's very specific to the folks that live over there.
Absolutely. Well, so more specific to the 4th district, you know, it is a little walkable and bikeable now, but there is a lot of construction and other things happening in the district. So what are some things that you've been working on or would like to, you know, after being reelected to make the district a little bit more accessible by bike or by foot?
So we have 2 major road projects in our district. The one that everybody probably runs into on their way to Target or Walmart is the Forest Hill Avenue project, which will be going on for a whole nother year. So don't be surprised if next Halloween, when you're going over to Target to get your candy, that it's still going on. So that project is going to put sidewalks, bike lanes, and a median in that corridor. So that's between Powhite and Hathaway. Hathaway is where the food line is on Forest Hill Avenue. So we have another project on Jenk, and it has not started yet. It's supposed to start next year sometime, but it keeps getting pushed. Jenk and Forest Hill down to Blakemore. So that project is very similar in that it's going to add sidewalks. There are really like paths there. There's not like curb and gutter sidewalks, a multi-use path on one side, a bike path on the other. So what I'm saying all of this to say, we're going to end up with 2 corridors that are going to be awesome, but there's not going to be a ton of connectivity in terms of bike lanes. So I think that is really where we need to focus our energy. Forest Hill is tough. We have some, you know, shared lanes and part of Forest Hill, some dedicated bike lanes in other parts, and the speed limits vary also. So I think as those 2 sort of major corridors come together, I will be trying to work with our traffic engineering as well as the neighborhoods to just see what we can do to provide that connectivity for our folks and for people just passing through.
Absolutely. I remember when that project started. So it does seem like it is coming along some.
Mhm.
I want to get one more question in, and I think it's a big question, and I want to give you some time to share some final thoughts as well. A lot of people asked about Richmond being the second highest eviction rate, having the second highest eviction rate in the country. And especially right now, people are facing eviction during this pandemic. When, after the election in November, in a week and a half here, what will City Council continue to do to fight and address these evictions and the general continued need for affordable housing?
That is a huge question. So, gosh, we have been talking about affordable housing a lot lately. In the committee that I chair, the Education and Human Services Committee, we have been very focused on the homelessness issue, and both of those kind of dovetail with what you're asking about, because evictions, if people get evicted and there's nowhere to go and there's no affordable housing stock, then that's when they become homeless. It's all in that sort of same area, and it's a challenge right now. I'm helping one family, and I just think we could be doing a lot better in what sort of information and services we're providing. Right now, there is a lot of money coming to us via the CARES Act that can be used for these services. I am just not confident that the money is necessarily going to progress or solve the issues. We're putting up a lot of folks that are that don't have housing right now in hotels because we closed the cold weather shelter, which is a whole another issue. We could have a whole another hour forum on that. So folks are in hotels, which is good. I mean, they have the private space. With COVID, it's better for them to be separated and it makes it safer. But I would like to make sure that we are providing them with services and support so that they're just not in the hotels endlessly. With affordable housing, I think we just need to really sit down with developers and see what we can work out. A lot of the affordable housing that came through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is the city's sort of separate, but it's quasi-government, where we put a couple $1 million each year, aren't really impacting folks who are probably staying at the Days Inn right now. That money was built in the affordable housing range of 70, 60%, 50% AMI, where we really need to be down in that 30% AMI and getting the folks who are most at risk. So I think it like I said, we could have a whole hour on this. We as a city have not taken like the big lens on this issue. We've done this, we've done that, we have a plan for this, we have a plan for that. The mayor put out a plan 2 weeks ago. We haven't had a dialogue about, we didn't all even get around a virtual table to discuss what we should do. And I think that's really when true work and true progress happens, is when the 10 of us come together to solve a problem like this, or at least move the needle. We're never going to solve it. It's going to take us a long time to catch up with the deficit we have in the city. But if we can start moving that needle and start getting the housing in our city that needs to be there for people that are housing insecure, I think that would be a success.
I know that was no easy question. It was very multi-tiered. So, I appreciate you answering that thoughtfully. I know that you are in an uncontested election. So maybe the normal pitch isn't necessarily what's happening, but I really would love for you to share some, final words from you about when you're reelected and just what you'd like to share with the folks listening tonight.
Thank you. Well, I'm just honored to represent the 4th District and being unopposed. It's a huge honor to be able to be on the ballot and not have somebody else on the ballot with me. So I appreciate folks who support me and have done that over the years. I think the next 4 years are going to be a challenge for all of us. I think we're in such an unknown time. I am super concerned about the budget. I'm concerned about our small businesses. There is a lot of uncertainty with our schools. I have 2 children that are in Richmond Public Schools, so we're all at home doing everything virtual. That's why, asking you earlier about your light, I clearly need the box. There's, I do not have the setup that you guys have because I'm the traveling desk out of all 3 of us, me and my 2 kids. So I am anxious to get in there and to start working. I'm looking forward to seeing, who's going to be elected in our city. And who I'll be working with. I love that team environment. And I think that if we all come to the table and work together, then we can find some solutions for our folks, and especially addressing the folks that need us, like yesterday, like the things you mentioned, housing, small businesses, education. I mean, the school board definitely takes the lead on that, but we need to also see if there are places where we can help fill the gap. And I think, one thing we can't forget too is everything that has happened over the past 6 months with Black Lives Matter and the police, and how do we as a city, the monuments being taken down, city council is the middle of trying to figure out how do we dispose of them. We've gotten some folks who've come forward and have made offers, and we have not had resolution on that. But I think we as a city are going to have some sort of period of healing. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if, what the future of Monument Avenue is, but I would just love to see that happen. And I think, we all probably need that moment because we love our city. We've been through a lot over the last couple of months, and we want to see a bright future in front of us.
Absolutely. I think that's a common goal we can all work towards. I want to thank you, Councilwoman Larson, and Deanna for joining us tonight. To the audience, all the elections on the ballot this year are in your hands. There's a lot of big choices for you to make if you haven't made them already, if you haven't cast them already. There's some big decisions ahead of us. We hope that this was helpful for you. Please remember to request your absentee ballot, your mail-in absentee ballot by this Friday. If you plan to vote that way and you haven't already, of course, you can continue to vote early in person at our new registrar's office over on Laburnum. And there are 2 remote locations as well. Our next forum is this Sunday with our mayoral candidates that I hope you'll consider joining us for this Sunday, October 25th at 6 p.m. Thank you both again for being here with us tonight, and to you and everyone listening, Please stay healthy and stay focused and take care.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.